Hey everybody, it's Robert Dunt from ArtTop10.com, and I'm very pleased today to be chatting with Graham Crowley about his fantastic silent disco exhibition. Graham, hello.
Hi Rob, thanks ever so much for that. Fantastic, nice.
Cool. So the exhibition is stunning. I absolutely loved it when I came to see it.
Good.
We made these beautiful video interviews with many of the artists. But
Yes.
we're going to have a little sort of virtual tour of it today. But before we begin that, just tell me how you came up with such a beautiful title, Silent Disco. It's brilliant.
Right. Well, first of all, it's justification to produce an exquisite poster, because the graphics are also part of the package, right? Basically, I saw a video years ago of a silent disco, and I thought that is really one of the weirdest, most awkward, sort of indescribable, really oddball things I'd seen for years. A lot of people who were in the same room with headphones on, with those fluorescent what's-its glowing in the dark, but all of them moving, obviously, to different beats, Some were being frenetic and sort of hopping around. Some were pogoing practically. Others were sort of driving and stuff. But most people obviously dancing as they do in clubs with or without a partner, etc. And I thought, hello, what the hell's going on here? So I dug a bit deeper and I realised it was a silent disco, okay? Because obviously with all the rave culture that had followed on from club and disco so-called culture, there was a hell of a lot of, kerfuffle over the legality of some of these assemblies. And of course, noise was an issue. So basically, somebody said, well, we can have one where we just use, Wi-Fi in a building, Have a DJ, set up the decks, whether they're mixed from CD or vinyl, whatever, it doesn't matter. But have a DJ and it's transmitted into the crowd by Wi-Fi, right? Okay, so it's silent because everybody's got the headphones on, including the DJ, of course, right? So that's the first, if you like, version or iteration, whatever. Then somebody very brightly said, we don't have to pay Carl Cox 10 or 20 grand to do this or whatever. We can actually get a sort of corporate or whatever it is subscription to Spotify, and everybody in the room's probably got their own subscription anyway, right? So therefore, for what is it, a couple of grand or whatever it is, or a few £100, you've got an event, right? A very lucrative event, right? And you've got a silent disco where everybody's tuned in, dancing to their own tune. That's the gist of it. That's where the analogy lies. Because in a culture, and we're definitely in a position now of being lacking any dominant culture. I mean, fragmentation's been going on for 30 or 40 years. It's not news. And we've got to live with that. That's where we are. That's our condition. And so everybody in the show, I mean, I've not chosen the stuff because I like the work or dislike it. It's got nothing to do with it at all. But what is the case is I've curated it by choosing the people that they then self-select the work, as it were, right? I've made the decision about the kind of people and the kind of work they make and the things that they're dealing with, the ideas that they're dealing with. And a lot of them, there are some who are almost situationist, but most are sort of, aware of the legacy of conceptual art and work with or just outside of the discourse that is painting. So that's really briefly it. Dancing to your own tune.
Dancing to your own tune. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So it's almost like the people you chose had quite a specific thing they would produce. Is that how you would say it? In that they really are in their own head. But
the work has a clear identity. It's not something that I woke up one morning, it was a fad, or it's some sort of arty sort of something trivial. There's something very profound, in my opinion, about all the work, particularly when you understand the context, like anything.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect, because for me, they're all going their own little kind of thing.
Right, Rob. Yes, that's your little thing. Because, I think we've got to declare a vested interest now, because you're actually, both of us are in the show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Are we not?
Oh, we are indeed. Anyway, before I dance anymore, shall we go on a tour around?
Yes, let's do that. Yes, you kick off. I mean, what we should be doing is going around the space. That there are two rooms in a chronological order. I mean, I think that's the simplest and easiest thing to do. And the first piece of work is a very small piece of work by Dina Varpahovsky, right? And Dina's work is called Amundsen's Dream. That's Roald Amundsen. I think he was the first guy to the South Pole, was he not?
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah.
Cool.
It's acrylic and sashiko thread on canvas. Basically, I don't want to spend too much time on that because there's another artist in the show, Rosalind Davis, who also uses thread in her work. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about that then. Okay. And even Kate Terry, I think, who is participating in the project this year, even though the piece she has in the show does not involve thread, she has used thread in some of her work as well.
Okay, nice. Okay, so should we move on to?
Yeah, move on. The second piece in the show, the rather larger piece adjacent to Dina's piece, is by Hannah Maybank, and it's a study of angels. Now, this is it uses what's called synthetic dragon's blood, okay, and watercolor on paper. And synthetic dragon's blood, real dragon's blood is a resin that's I think got from various plants, from from crushing roots and separating it out from the rootstock or whatever of plants. But the thing about Hannah's work, and I've known Hannah for nearly 20 years probably, and the one thing that marks out all her work is the precision with which it's done, right? The kind of mindful sort of approach that she has to materials. In fact, even as a student at the Royal College almost 20 years ago, Hannah would mask an image, and then pour the paint over it. So there was a kind of there was a partnership between her intentions and the behaviour of the paint, and gravity for that matter. Yeah, and then peel away, and then once everything was dry after a few days or weeks, whatever it was, I gradually pick away the masking fluid that she used, which I think she's used again in this. It's part and parcel of her method and has been for quite a while.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's amazing painting.
It's an exquisite thing.
Detail.
And by the way, the very last thing I think to be added to this piece of work is that dark blue night ground. Because if you look at the top left-hand corner, I think it is, of the ground, the ground is the thing that first went down, and that's the dragon's blood. It's a red resin, basically.
Fascinating.
And it's really sensual the way that it's been handled. Materials are beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Lovely.
Right.
Let's move on.
Okay. Number 3 is, I feel like somebody going through down the top 10. Number 3, it's Joanna Whittle with an absolutely minute piece. I mean, Jo's work is small. Somebody when curating a show said, talking about how they'd installed it, they said there was a truck came with a whole load of work, and then a woman turned up with a carrier bag with 3 paintings in, and he said it was brilliant. He said, that made my day. You have to find somewhere to park and then get 6 guys to carry the stuff in, and then Anyway, really cool. It's called Forest Shrine, and in brackets forest, but that's a forest shrine. It's oil on copper. I think Jo's work is basically she won the Contemporary British Painters Prize, the last one that was held just before COVID in 2019. As I say, with some gorgeous little paintings. They're ostensibly landscapes, right? But they serve as they're almost talismanic. They're becoming sort of, as I say, the shrine is not so much the depicted, but the devotional object is the painting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It actually takes the place of, or is in place of it's synonymous with the thing it depicts.
Yeah. No, totally. The paint becomes the thing.
Yeah, and all of her work is characterized by this wonderful oleaginous sort of gunky sort of quality. There's a kind of sort of resistance of oil paint. There's something very substantial about the material.
Yeah. Okay? There is actually.
It's a significant, again, like Hannah's, it's a significant part of the actual making.
Exactly. Yeah, they're stunning little pieces. Yeah,
it is. Yes, it's absolutely gorgeous and deserves a great deal of looking.
Yeah,
warrants a great deal of looking. Okay, number 4, Glyn Williams. This is a carving made in 1969 called Rock and Roll. It's it's self-evident from the image how big it is. It's about 5 or 6 inches, like a cube. this is 1969. I mean, I'm not too sure if any of the viewers can think that far back. I certainly can. I was at St Martin's at the time. And the last thing, I mean, you know, day in, day out, people be banging on about how painting's dead and this, that, and the other, and you know, Eurocentric, phallocentric, and all the rest of it. But carving, I don't think anybody mentioned it because they assumed it was like sort of absolutely, you know, out of bounds. Because if there was any sculpture going on, and we're talking, you know, this is the high water mark for conceptual art, you know, when people would have a desk rather than a studio, and also they wouldn't have a computer; they'd have a typewriter or and a notebook, and if they were lucky, a phone of some kind or access to a phone, because this is pre-mobile phones, and they'd be organising things, you know, arranging things, getting on the phone to somebody to get something or to buy something or to order something, whatever. Meanwhile, Glyn starts carving, which is, you can't imagine anything more against the contemporary, the dominant culture, against the grain. And this is, I mean, it's the beginnings of a historical sort of shift. I mean, this is actually the first knockings that I was aware of postmodern culture. The idea challenging of modernist orthodoxy, late high modernist orthodoxy, okay?
Intriguing.
And doing it through this wonderfully vernacular little sculpture secular vernacular sculpture of a couple that seem to be jiving, and they fused into one. You know, I mean, you know,
that's why it's rock and roll.
Literally through the stone,
yeah.
And it's a beautiful piece.
I love it. I love it that there's a kind of punky element to something so traditional.
Seemingly but that's the point. But then it was kind of, nowadays it's the beginnings of the problematization of the word modern and traditional. All of that suddenly it's open for debate. That's the beginnings of that huge change, historical shift. And Glyn was, by the way, I knew Glyn when he was head of sculpture at the Royal College of Art. He was the professor there when I was head of painting.
Did he stick to doing that kind of thing, or did he do all sorts of kind of sculptures? Was it always? I guess he didn't just do carving. Did he do a myriad of different forms?
No. But what happened? I believe he was doing constructed or assembled things, as were most people, right? But he from then on pretty much was carving. I don't believe he may have made castings as well, but essentially he was carving.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Cool.
And Wimbledon, where he became head of sculpture in the 70s, I think it was, became synonymous with the rebirth, if you like, the rediscovery of carving with Glyn, Lee Grandjean and Ken Turnell.
Okay.
The three of them. Yeah.
Intriguing. Fascinating.
It was a very exciting time.
Yeah.
Because it challenged the orthodoxy, it challenged the dominant culture, and they produced some great work.
Yeah. Very, very interesting.
Right. Then number 5 is a bloke called Graham Crowley.
Who's that?
It is a small oil. It's an oil on board. It says it's oil on board, and it's a small duotone of actually a very similar subject behind me here, of a workshop that belongs to a guy called Andy Tiernan. And if anybody knows me, I'm into old bikes and building bikes and messing around with vintage bikes and stuff, motorcycles that is. And Andy Tiernan's workshop is an absolutely extraordinary experience, even if you've no interest in motorcycles or it's cornucopia, literally. I mean, a much abused word, but in Andy's case, it is definitely a cornucopia. Amazing. I mean, acres and acres of old bikes, wonderful veteran vintage machinery. Yes, it's probably the biggest and probably the most important dealer in classic British bikes, and that's been pre-Second World War, basically.
Intriguing.
Anyway, it's a deal.
Let me ask you one question about the pictures, because I'm always interested. They look. I can't explain it very well, but I mean, somehow you've gone from the found image to the final painting, but you've done it very neatly. I mean, it looks perfect, as it were. How do you achieve it?
Well, if you notice, the title of the piece is Tiernan's 3. So, I mean, if I tilt my laptop, you can see there was a. In fact, if I move it up and just do that a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I can see it.
Sorry, if I move it away, that's it. Yeah, you can, and then tilt it that way. Yeah. There it is. That's one of the first. That was the first, and from that, it's a bit like sort of creating a text from which you work and then praising it. Yeah.
Intriguing.
So, shrinking it down, making it succinct, and relying upon. I mean, basically, it's a painting that relies upon a spareness of means, and also, of course, a nuancing. Because it's all glazed. I mean, all my paintings of this sort of glazed, with very transparent paint. So, and I put the pigment. The medium is put onto the surface of the canvas or the board first, and then I put the pigment into that and shift it around until I find the image.
Fascinating.
Well, and then find the image. Yeah. Establish the image.
Yeah.
Okay. 6 is John Stark, Skull with Snake and Flowers, oil on Amazonite quartz. Well, anybody who knows John's work knows that he ploughs one or two very, very particular and quite sort of distinct furrows. And he's one of the few people, in my opinion, who can paint contemporary Gothic type imagery and it not seem either nostalgic or make you think of prog rock or something. Although there obviously is a glimmering of that, as I've just mentioned. But there's the precision and the exquisite nature of his work, and the idea of making these almost, again, quite talismanic, sort of funny little objects which carry painting. There's the sort of thing where you just think, what the hell? It stops you in your tracks because, I think even though we don't know quite what to expect these days, we shouldn't go around expecting anything particular. But to see John's stuff, I mean, I've got a piece in this room which is about pig farms in East Anglia, and he's kind of it's highly synthetic, but it's a kind of realist, naturalist sort of air to it. And then immediately out there in the workshop, in the studio, in the other building, is this picture of something that some warlock or witch or whatever might have sort of lying around in the 15th century.
Exactly. And it's beautifully painted. It's a small little
amazing thing. Everything John does, I mean, God, there. I mean, and that's the other thing about it is there's nothing slapdash about any of this work. This is all done with serious intent, mindful intent. It's studied. It's considered. The days of sort of expressing yourself, in that gratuitous sort of way, are long dead. I mean, long gone.
Right.
Then we move into the second, the larger of the two rooms, the one in which I work as a studio, which has obviously had to be cleared out for the show, with the exception of an easel which I can't move, I can't get out of the building. Is Donna Mclean at Lund, and it's a exquisite little oil on board, which actually has that sort of Scandé noir sort of, you can imagine the credits coming up across the top sort of thing. There's something about it. It's iridescent, beautiful piece of work. And that's the other thing. A lot of the work in the show, the painting as such, has an inner light, a luminosity. And luminosity in painting is synonymous with life. There's bright things, like sort of, I don't know, acid green BMW, M3s. They're bright. They're not luminous. Yeah. Okay. But anyway, gorgeous little painting. She sent me 2 paintings because she couldn't work out which one she wanted me to put in a show, and I looked at them and they were so dissimilar. Yeah. But I couldn't decide which one to put in the show. So we'll see one later on, another piece by Donna. Okay.
Excellent.
Very different compositionally. In terms of technique, it's similar, but in terms of subject and composition, very different. Very different image. Geraint Evans, Bigfoot, oil on board. Where do you start? The subject matter is sort of Comic-Con, sort of, convention culture. Some bloke, who's a foot too short, because my idea of Chewbacca is about 7 foot tall. But there's a 6 foot guy with his, and you pose and have your photograph taken with Batgirl or Superman or whatever, or somebody from Game of Thrones or something, dressed in costume. It's cosplay or whatever it's called. Okay. But the guy, the actual, the fan, the nerd, as it were, right, with the under chin beard, and that sort of slightly nascent sort of beer gut, just beginning to sort of push that sort of casual out from his shorts, off of his shorts, and those legs with those wonderfully stubbly hairs. Brilliant. The precision, again, with which this is painted. I mean, it's, as I say, every time I think about Geraint's work, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, I think about the kind of the attention I used to afford when I used to paint the little bits on my Airfix kits before putting them together. To try and get that soft, constant surface. I just love his work. He also, as I say, he seems to be sort of trawling cultural niches or kind of subcultures. There's, he's done paintings about the guys that scream around in hatchbacks in Sainsbury's after dark, naked ramblers, and one of my favourites, which was in the Moors a few years ago, the ornamental hermit, which, as I say, how long have you got? But to look it up sometime, that is sort of a niche culture. That is niche culture. Even in the 18th century, that was marginal. It was very affluent. He'd have a grotto and he'd pay a bloke to sit around in it and be a hermit, an ornamental hermit.
What more could you wish for?
Not a real hermit. Okay. Rosalind Davis, beautiful piece. This is Gateway 8, it's called, right? Watercolour and thread on handmade paper. Again, as I say, I wanted to hold back from talking about the thread, but here, if it's very difficult to see, but the red lines that sort of critical points in the composition are pieces of thread, okay? And the one thing about it is that when you look at it very, very slightly, there's all the time, there's this sense of illusionistic space. At the very base, there's that black trapezoid shape that recedes as if there were sort of an object hovering, and then there's another piece that looks as if it's a depicted shadow, but it's not. It's a plane, or maybe it's both. It's ambiguous. It's very, very subtle, very, very beautiful piece of work. Yeah. It does. And again, it's a product of a considered. It's about thoughtfulness. It's about mindfulness a bit. Yeah. Sorry, Rob, you were about to say something.
Oh no, I agree. I love the way the space, because it takes you in, and then it almost turns into a library, or it sort of pushes and pulls you back and forth. And
okay.
But it's lovely.
Right. Graham Chorlton. Headlights 3, acrylic and oil on canvas, a terrific painting that, again, rather like Donna Mclean's, has a filmic element to it. You know what I mean? There's sort of, again, there's something happening, and then gradually you see that gash of light in the centre and the way it sort of bounces around through the picture, in that immediate centre space. Absolutely terrific. Matilda Bevan. Matilda's piece Settlement. That is actually a transcript of a John Crome painting, as you may be aware, because you've interviewed her. Yeah. And I'm off to see the John Crome show tomorrow because it closes on Friday. And the last one was 52 years ago, and I won't be around for the next one at that rate. Okay, so I better get moving. I'm going to see it tomorrow up at Norwich Castle. That's it closes, say, September the 5th, which is a great pity. It should have been extended. A beautiful little painting, but it's a transcription. And as I say, I think I would encourage people to look at John Crome and think about it very seriously. Founding member of the Norwich School and a significant landscape painter of that period, the 18th and 19th century. Judith Tucker, Dark Marsh, Roots. Okay, sorry, that's punctuation, not colon, as in something in the stomach. I'll say it again. Dark Marsh Roots. Beautiful, really intense, gunky, sort of damp, marshy. Judith has painted a series of pictures about a place called I can't remember the Fennies or the something. Anyway, Finnies, is it?
The Fitties.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And these are sort of, they seem to be wasteland with these very marginal sort of buildings. Right. I always think that there's going to be a lot of asbestos in the buildings. Yeah, that's sort of very marginal and a very dark and very, very, very powerful sort of landscapes.
Yeah.
But we decided that it would probably be an interesting choice to choose one of the studies, for want of a better term, of the undergrowth. Yeah.
Oh, intriguing.
Very. I also did the that interview for Terps last year in Terps 23. It was Judith when I did the conversation, more correctly, not an interview. It was a conversation.
Yeah.
Kate Bowen, right? Yeah, Kate Bowen. Indian globe thistle in desert, Jodhpur. It's just beautiful. I mean, it's not your regular what is it, plant, illustration. This is something where the paint speaks to the object, yes?
Yeah, yeah.
And the paint speaks. There's lovely moments where the stem's broken or intermittent, So there's none of that illustrative, right, the stem goes from here and it goes all that, then it does that, and then, that's fine. That's plant illustration. This is close to that, but it's the difference is a world of difference, and it's by the actual facture, the actual making. She was actually there. Sorry, this is not somebody who sort of saw it on the internet and thought I'd make a picture of it. Yeah, this is actually she and her husband were in Burma, working there in an NGO, and then of course the Rohingya sort of genocide, basically, for want of a better word, kicked off, and they and most other people working in the NGOs were persona non grata to the junta. And so they went to India. So she's been in India for the last few years.
Yeah.
And she's now back in the UK.
Yeah.
Right. Sally Crowley. Yes. This is a beautiful, just one of the most sort of exquisite in a way and sort of refined. It's a lino cut. And there's something you could never charge lino cuts with being pretentious. There's something about it that it's kind of sort of, it has a sort of, I don't know, there's a modesty. It can be done on a kitchen table. You can print with a dessert spoon, sort of thing. You don't need a Caxton sort of latest press or whatever. And if you look at it carefully, it's just several just fine lines. There's a minimalism, a spareness to it that is really refined. And it's just plot number 19. It's a shed with a number on that distinguishes it from the other plots on the allotments. Yes, it's an allotment
really
shed.
Interesting.
Right. Oh, Lara Cobden. I heard him call. He asked me to come, but I said I'm not ready. Oil and ink on gesso board. There is. You've interviewed Lara, and I won't steal her thunder by sort of trying to, what should we say? It would be like an impersonation. I mean, I've heard her talk about it, and it would be invidious to try and sort of do it. But basically, it centres around not simply the large character in the centre of the piece, which is self-evident, lurking behind the curtain or embraced by the curtain, but a tiny figure right at the top who seems to be clambering across a room. I mean, incongruous. I didn't notice that until until we started to sort of fit it up, and I thought, what the hell's that?
Yeah.
And then there's a Velux window at an angle, and you thought, hold on, this is shifting from one kind of picture to another, and that's what really is exciting about it. It isn't the painting that you expect from a title like that or from that handling. Psychologically, it's a very complex piece.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Lara Cobden. Rob Dunt. Actually, why don't you very briefly tell the viewers about it?
Okay, so essentially, this is one of my distortion form paintings, which is generally inspired by putting together a chaotic mix of Patrick Heron and the Jesus and Mary Chain. So,
sorry. Yeah, good luck. I mean, the word incongruous comes to mind, or kind of. What is it? There's unions made in obviously, with all due respect, not in hell exactly, but in places where life's not difficult enough. And then there comes a bloke who thinks that Patrick Heron and Jesus and Mary Chain, I think they're smashing paintings, and I'm not blowing smoke, but I think the premise of them is brilliantly absurd and kind of outside, way above my pay grade, as they say. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think Yeah, I'm searching for some unknown beauty, let's say.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. But there's something else about it that as I say, this sort of and I can't place it. It is a curious mix. It's because I think the reason I'm hesitating is I don't see it as non-referential. I don't see it. I see it as kind of it's more like a state of mind than a state of affairs. I grant you that. But there's something vivid. Once seen, never forgotten. Once explained, definitely never forgotten. If explained is the word.
Yes.
Right, Sam Jackson. Right, all apologies. Oil, paint, pencil and marker on board. This is one of Sam's. You can't really call them portraits. They're head studies, right? Yeah, because I think they're kind of they reference magazines or star type, the kind of celebrity photography of the 50s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, right? There's something kind of found about them, which I think makes them rather sort of tragic in a way, and sort of, and then Sam will, as he is making the pieces, will probably be reflecting or thinking, and surmising, and it's as if he's thinking aloud, and those thoughts are written across the object, which is a kind of sort of, it's a very, very Brave's too kind of sort of naff a word, but it's a kind of chancy sort of operation, and I think that's what gives them their strength.
Yeah.
And it's also what it characterises what he does, the idea of the mind being written, as it were, but it's his mind. It's like this thing about portraiture. Quite often people paint portraits, but in actual fact, it reflects more on the person who made. Is the state of mind is the object, rather than people saying, "Oh yeah, I think I've captured her personality."
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, in lots of very, very notorious cases, I think what they've done is actually reflected their own intentions and their sensibility. The artist, that is, yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean. So he's doing that.
And I think Sam does that in a very, very honest and very transparent way.
Interesting.
Twinkle Troughton, right? Secrets and Dreams. Again, you interviewed Twinkle against, I must admit and apologise to Twinkle for the background noise of Digby, the dog, he kicked off, which has obviously made things more difficult than they would otherwise have been. But anyway, I think that was a fascinating interview, by the way, and a lot of people have acknowledged the work. You know, first the exquisite sort of and fairly non-threatening nature, and then there's that kind of sort of Middle European sort of folkloric kind of steeply pitched sort of root, sort of. But when when I think about Austria and and Bavaria and places, and I think Twinkle's her forebears come from Germany, somewhere near Hamburg apparently. That I think of this obsession with neatness and the kind of the prosaic and the banality of fascism, or whatever you want to call it. There's something kind of about something dark about that area of the world generally, and worrying and tiresome. And there's something that she's captured in this piece of work as well. I think that it's a really impressive. There's no vulgar signalling, nothing obvious signalling her intentions. It's in there in the fabric culturally of that sort of image. It's in the weave. Joshua Thompson, George Melly, Gallery of Fame for Uninhibited Idealists. This is, I think, again, I would refer the viewers, if they have the patience and they're curious enough, to go to the interview you did with Josh, because only Josh can really describe what he's doing. This is George Melly in the 50s. I'm not going to go through the introductions, but all I'll say is that Josh Thompson is doing a PhD at present about culture, both visual and musical culture. He also runs a record label. He's a musician. And he also runs a radio show at present up in Edinburgh, having run one for about 3 or 4 years, or however long it was, in Hong Kong. But as you can imagine, that wasn't going so well recently. So I jacked that one in. And he and Lara, his wife do these projects together, these programs together. Well worth listening to. World music, jazz, very sometimes esoteric, sometimes experimental. But the album to seek out is called Platinum Meters. It's absolutely exceptional, almost unique's a silly word, but it's pretty remarkable. And it's a riff on the Voyager gold disc.
Oh man!
Yeah, how do you go about communicating with an alien in civilization? Well, the first problem with, of course, the gold disc is they made the assumption that the aliens have got record players. which I think is really wonderfully stupid. Brilliant. All that money. And, hey, yeah, let's do a record. Oh, yeah, right. Oh, they've got a subscription to Discogs, haven't they? Yeah. On account on Discogs.
They're going to have to come back.
Okay. Joshua, Andrew Stahl. Yes, Collapse, this is called. Watercolour on paper, painted 22 years ago. Small, again, one of these talismanic small pieces. It's absolutely delightful. This character floating, who has echoes of being a sort of a Buddha, but not quite. It's very, very extraordinary piece. Beautiful piece. And Robin, anyway, moving on. Number 21 is Robin Mason, archive number 00020, acrylic and fluorescent paint on lime wood, and it's in relief. Now, I wish you'd been able to interview Robin because I can't speak for Robin. He makes work. He has a very, very particular way of going about making pictures. It's extraordinary by any stretch. It's a synthesis of kind of sort of the poetic and the surreal, and coupled with a sort of an overriding symbolic sexual obsession, arguably with genitalia, and there's no easy way of accounting for this. No. I quite often look at Robin's work and I'm thinking, I'm just gobsmacked. I sort of. It makes you think how very, very different our intentions are. And this is what the show's about, that tension. Me selecting people because I'm curious about what they do. I'm curious to meet some of them because some of them I've not met before. But I have no idea why they get up in the morning and do what they do any more than they have about me. Anyway, right. We better get a move on because... Donna, I've spoken about. There's a little painting called White Road, and you'll see that is formally very different, but in actual fact similar. Kate Terry, Untitled Shelf Piece, watercolour and pencil on paper, painted wood, clay, fluorescent acrylic, wood and nail varnish. That's right, yeah. Okay, exquisite little constructions, a bit like a theorem or a thesis, yeah? Here is my sort of, it looks like an end in itself, but in actual fact, I think it actually, for me, when I was assembling it, by the way, there were obviously instructions, it felt like I was organising the elements of a recipe, for something else. That I was organising something that wasn't an end in itself, but presented these parts which we would then put together. And I think what I've done with it is I put it together culturally, by the diagrammatic, the context of each of the pieces, and seeing how they fit or don't fit, as it were, together. Okay, it's a terrific little piece that. And of course, Kate has worked with thread and done pieces like installations, I think, with thread. Yeah. Then there's a little. It's a mini study, a watercolour on paper by James Faure Walker. Tiny piece that Jim's given us. Now, Jim Faure Walker is a leading light in, I think it's the Royal Watercolour thing, and is the secretary or something of it. His work, he was one of the first people, give him credit, to actually make pictures, paintings, I think, prints as well, using computers. Years before Hockney and all the rest started saying, this is really interesting, new technology. No, Jim, to his credit, was doing that. He also was the founding editor of ArtScribe magazine, way back in the mid-70s, I think. Yes. No, really interesting character who can produce some absolutely stunning work. Kate Murdoch. Now, All the Dead Dears. I think, again, I would refer people doing this, because otherwise, this walk around will go on, be more like a sort of crawl around by the time we get to the end of it. Kate Murdoch, All the Dead Dears. All of Kate's work is found. She is an inveterate collector and hoarder, right?
Yeah.
And she's got stuff that she seems to have sort of inherited from her granny and everybody else's granny as well, from what I can see, and stuff that she's found. I'm pretty sure she still goes to, not for the last 2 years, but goes to jumble sales. And as you were joking during the interview, she probably has got 7,000 more of these things.
I think she has.
I believe she's got 70 more of them. But the thing is that she chose them. I think it's self-evident what it's about. Yeah, whether it's COVID related or not, I don't know. I think that is asserted in the interview. But I think the thing that makes it transcends that is the fact that the function of those sort of mounts, those multiple mounts, is to prior to digitization, is to keep relations, keep a record of. It's kind of a touchstone, right? And when you see them empty, that absence, literally, it just speaks volumes. I just thought it was really powerful. And to overlay them and have these curious formal sort of this kind of sort of almost peekaboo sort of things peering out from behind other things. That was just, that was a wonderful sort of extra. But the thing that I take away from it was the sense of absence. Written very large. Anyway, right. Clare Mitten. This is the Nick's tape, right? The constructed, it's a cassette, a C70 or C90 cassette with the front taken off, because that's how most people went about sort of trying to sort of get the, when it got creeped. Now, this has, where do you start? These are just wonderful things. I wish you'd interviewed her, because it has a very Blue Peter, made out of stuff you find lying around in the bottom of a drawer at the back of a kitchen, but a kitchen in the 1970s or something, 1980s. It's 90% sellotape and 10% ingenuity. Do you know what I mean? It's absolutely brilliant, and it fascinates the relationship between something as clumsy as that and something as precision, made in factories, injection molded. A bit of what was high tech, sort of 60, 70 years ago, whenever it was. There it is laid back, and everything about it, even the loop, the way it hangs down. That's got to be. I can just see Clare cutting up a carrier bag and tearing into strips, and then winding it. And she's got the right number of spokes in the centre, 6, because I always remember putting a hexagonal pencil in to rewind the things. And I'm sure I'm not the only person. I think they're brilliant. Her work's brilliant. Mixtape. I won't go through all the materials, but it's self-evident. No, I will, just because it's such a wonderful list. Tissue paper, masking tape, newspaper, matchstick, sandpaper, and glue. Who'd have thought it? On cardboard. Brilliant. As I say. Terry Bond. Fume Tue. That's a riff by Terry on the Magritte Ce n'est pas un pipe, a very famous, linguistic, semiotic sort of icon of surrealism. But to take that and turn it into what is a health warning, there's nothing further from academic sort of linguistic minutiae that people discussing that piece of work still. What is it, 100 years after it was made, with PhDs and stuff going on, and then a bloke turns it into a health warning. And I just think that is brilliant. Simon Willems, Untitled, Outreach #2. This is one of those paintings that has to be seen, because everything in it is lurking in the background, the figure that seems to be sort of reaching from the right-hand side, the shadow, as it were. It's so, just beautifully painted, exquisite, because 99% of what you see there is the understanding and the use of paint. A real sympathy, a real empathy with the materials. And then wonderful little highlighted details. You know, on the paperbacks, you get what's called a varnish on certain parts of the letters.
Yeah.
And he's varnished one part with the ribbon that passes down through the centre of the picture to the bottom in this turquoise, this delicious turquoise. It's everything's in the object, in its making, and it's again just beautifully made. Right, Ruth Murray, a clear empty glass, oil on wooden panel. Again, beautiful little painting. But the thing that I really take away from this painting is not that it's just fascinating and compelling, but the way that there is this curious shadow that creeps across the body of the woman, the girl, lying on the ground, across her face, in this rather sort of like a varicose vein type thing. There's this shadow that creeps in this stealthy sort of way. You can just see it, that purple shadow that reaches across something. And then wonderful control for that. That's a formal, technical thing. The foreshortening. If you look at the actual depth of the head, it's 1 unit, and the actual from the chin down to the bottom of the throat is like 4 or 5 units. So there's a sliver of the head, and to try and bring that off, I mean, audacious and extremely skillful piece of painting. And you know, when I was a student, if you mentioned the word skill, you were drowned. You were just laughed out of court. Now, of course, we've been going on for about 50 years of de-skilling, or maybe longer, of course. and we're where we are, you know. But thank God for people like Ruth who can actually, you know, carry these things out. And Edwin Aitken, The Last Walk, that's the next one. Acrylic, graphite, pastel and ink on canvas. Now, I would again definitely suggest that people listen to Edwin's interview with you. His walk in Epping Forest and where he lives, and his relationship with painting and the experiential and the way that he goes about his painting. I'm not about to talk to him about it. I respect it immensely. I think it's a terrific painting, and I think he's a fascinating guy. And that was part and parcel of the project for me, was to invite people in whose work is different. Yeah, and watching that interview with you, with Edwin, was absolutely fascinating. And the next person is the next are 2 pieces by Karen Densham. Now, Karen Densham is Terry Bond's wife or widow, but I'll come to that in a minute. She has produced these. She makes ceramics, exquisite ceramics, beautiful ceramics, right? Okay, but she also does other things. She and Terry, how long you got? Right, they have a. They run this fictitious foundation called the Ronald and Penny Jug Foundation, and it always sounds like wealthy upper West Side sort of art sort of benefactors in New York. Yeah, the Jug Foundation. Now, obviously, 1 or 2 people have obviously got the gist because they thought, what like the Judd Foundation? And you think, but nothing like it at all. Yeah, okay, you know. And I'm doing a show with the little plug next month in the pavilion, as it's called, or as I call it, the shed down the end of the garden. A show called I Like What You've Done. I Like What You've Done with the Place. That's it. Right. And Karen's produced these 2 pieces, which are just rolled up, little canvases, which have been taken off the stretcher and rolled up. Now, what you can see of them, the one at the top particularly, which actually is called Landscape, right, has this sort of camouflage sort of bits of patchy painting in greeny, beigey things, and it's called Landscape. And you think, oh, I mean, where do you start? That's just because something's green and beige doesn't make it a landscape. Just because something's rolled up, or and then of course the issue opens up. Just because you get a thing and stick it on the wall doesn't make it art, right? Yeah. And I think that's what Karen is brilliant at. She's a disruptor, and so is Terry, and which leads us on to the very final piece, which is a little photograph taken, I think, somewhere in South London, maybe about 30 or 40 years ago, because there was an advertising campaign even longer ago from Valspar or somebody, and they thought they'd made the paint that would last forever, right? Much to the dismay of decorators everywhere, right? And they had these hoardings, and one of the hoardings still exists. I think it's somewhere down in Catford in South London, right at the top of an estate agent, and it says "Never paint again." Right?
Brilliant.
And you think, in a show which is kind of, dealing with ways of painting re-establishing its, or demonstrating its contemporary nature, or the fact that post-conceptual painting is a reality, it exists, and it's not nostalgia or whatever.
Yeah.
But Terry Bond, the late Terry Bond, also a great disruptor as well. I mean, he and Karen as Ron and Penny Jug.
That's brilliant.
They're something else. Yeah. But as I say, Google it. Somebody, yeah. As I say, I'll leave it there now. That's the show, and I hope people have had the patience to listen to this. Oh, moreover, to watch those interviews. Yeah, to go to the interviews, which speak with more authority and clarity than I can.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant show. I think it was fantastic, and everybody loved it when they came to it.
Good. Yeah, it's been a joy meeting people, at the reaction, feedback, whatever. It's been terrific. It's been positive, but I do think that as a project, it's made into something more substantial because of your filming and your contribution, not just as a painter in it, but the fact that you've been able to augment what we've done, which is like a living catalogue.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm really pleased.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Rob.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much, Graham, for taking us around the show.
Bye. Take care. Yeah. Bye.
Bumbuckler.